Hello, welcome to Walk, Don't Run to the Doctor with Miles Hassel, MD. This is an evidence-based podcast for people who want to use lifestyle choices to avoid preventable illness, as well as to treat illness. Listeners will learn the choices that work for better health outcomes for themselves, the ones that they love, and the patients they care for. We want to see patients liberated from the burden of chronic disease whenever possible. Hello, today we're going to be talking about the importance of being your own chef. And this, we also slightly dramatically call this a call to survival for patients and clinicians, because cooking at home is really a basic health survival skill, right up there with being fit and watching your weight. And it's a more important survival skill than seeing physicians, than knowing what your cholesterol is. Just before we get into this too much, if you believe what we're saying here, and you're a physician or another clinician or an educator, remember that this is not a theoretical exercise. It's difficult and unconvincing to encourage behavior that we don't live ourselves, and we should be prepared to show our patients what we packed for lunch, had for breakfast, had for dinner. But first of all, let's talk about why this is important. And the reason is that highly processed foods made outside the home, for the most part, over the last several decades, are consistently shown in a dose-related association to be associated with more premature death, heart disease, cancer, obesity, diabetes, mood disorders. And these are not unusual foods. These are foods that arguably constitute 60 or 70% of the US diet. And if we just were to look at risk of type 2 diabetes, for example, that alone, then there's two sort of ways of looking at this. One was an interesting study with about 30,000 people. And they were asked how often they ate away from home. In other words, how often they ate meals that weren't cooked at home, and then that was associated with their prevalence of type 2 diabetes. And those who ate more than 11 servings of food a week away from home had about a 40% increase in their risk of having type 2 diabetes. There's an interesting review that you'll find in the show notes on this podcast. That looked at 50 studies and found a consistent and dose-related association between higher processed food consumption and developing type 2 diabetes, as well as all the other adverse outcomes that we've already talked about. Depending on which study you're looking at, it's somewhere between a 35% and an 80% increased risk of developing type 2 diabetes with eating more processed foods, so foods made outside the home. These are the kind of statistics that you just can't overlook in terms of how we're going to help people be healthier. For example, if I give people a medication, can I reduce their risk by anywhere near as much as I can reduce their risk if I get them to cook at home? And the answer is probably not. And that's why we call this possibly your most important health survival tool. And so people say, why can't I just hire this out? I hate to shop and I hate to chop. I just don't have time for it. Well, if you want to be healthy, you probably need to make time for it if you don't have the money to have a private chef at home, which most of us don't. But there's other benefits of cooking at home, and that is your family unit and your friends. So whether you're single or you have a family, we think that having the family that cooks together is a happier family. Friends that cook together at home instead of going out for a meal, they have a blast. And this is the way you also become a good cook. Some of you are probably listening to this and saying, but I'm not a good cook. I don't want to eat my own cooking. Well, everything worth doing takes effort. Learning to be a good cook means spending time with good cooks, working alongside them, and the payoffs are enormous. Just thinking about your family dynamic, it's worth thinking about a study of a couple hundred people where they looked at adults and children, and they asked them, what sort of makes your family closer? What makes your family life more worthwhile? And the parents tended to think that expensive things, trips, going out for dinner and things like that were what held everybody together. The kids saw it differently. The kids thought that playing games, shooting baskets, eating dinner together, playing games at home, praying together had a greater effect on their relationships with other family members. And I'm choosing to apply my own bias here and say that not only eating dinner together pulls people together, but also cooking together pulls people together. And so if in this brief introduction you've been at all convinced about that it's worth cooking more for yourself, then there's a bunch of steps that need to be considered. So it requires planning and preparation. No surprise. It requires having basic tools at home. Now, these aren't a lot of tools. You don't need a lot of expensive equipment to cook well, but you do need a few. One or two good knives, one or two good cutting boards, a fry pan, a pot, and so on. You need to shop. You need to shop thoughtfully. You need to have the basic things in your pantry. And in the fourth edition of Good Food, Great Medicine, we walk you through some of the ways to think about that. But think about the value of shopping. And as you're shopping, thinking about what you'll be preparing with the things you're buying. The fruits and vegetables and beans and grains and animal proteins and dairy and so on. And you're thinking about, what will this taste like? What will this look like as it's cooking? How will I prepare it? And think about food storage at home. Think about pre-prepping and leftovers so that you don't have to work as much. Involving others so that you not only have social time with other people, but you don't have to work as much, because some of us are really lazy. Meal planning is critical to all this so that you know what you're going to buy and what you're going to prepare over the next week or so. All of this saves money. If you're doing it with loved ones, I'll bet there's opportunity for romance here. It's kind of fun to gain a reputation as a good cook. And so as you're thinking about this, think about all the benefits apart from health. Think about the social benefits of cooking for yourself. And we're going to just close with the experience of JD, who's a guy who last summer, he was aware that his blood sugars were creeping up over the years. And then last summer, his doctor said, you know what, you've got type 2 diabetes and you really need to take some medication for that. And so he talked it over with his doctor and said, well, how about if I try doing some lifestyle measures instead? And some of his family members gave him a copy of Good Food, Great Medicine, our book that deals with a number of health issues, but includes the idea of type 2 diabetes reversal. And so he decided to try a lifestyle change. And he was already a fairly fit guy. He didn't really need to do much for his fitness, but he's overweight and he ate a lot of highly processed foods. So he switched to cooking at home, more whole foods. And he started with an HbA1c of 6.6%, which is by conventional criteria, diabetes. He also had high blood pressure, high triglycerides, some adverse lipid panels, a lot of the other things that come with being overweight and eating poorly. And over the next 6 months, he lost 25 pounds. He became ex-diabetic with an HbA1c of 5.9%. And actually, since then, he's lost another 10 pounds and another 4 inches around the waist. His triglycerides dropped from 405 to 106. His blood pressure dropped from 150/74 to 118/73. Not only does this remind us that he simply felt better, but it also reminds us that he is no longer at risk of taking medications for his diabetes, for his blood pressure, for his adverse lipid panel. He's relieved himself of all of this burden of modern medicine simply by cooking at home. He feels better. He has more energy. He has the expectation of a much healthier future. He has liberation from frequent doctor's visits and blood tests. And the bottom line is, of course, he comments, I feel great. So I'd encourage you to think of cooking more at home if you're not already doing so, eating out rarely as a treat, because you're going to save money, you're going to improve your health, you're going to improve the health of those around you. You're probably going to improve the relationships of those around you. And in summary, remember, I'm Miles Hassell, MD. The website is greatmed.org. The book is Good Food, Great Medicine, which is currently in its 4th edition. And you're listening to Walk, Don't Run to the Doctor.